I have filed 943 incident reports in my career. Battle damage, equipment failure, personnel disputes, structural collapses, the standard categories, the expected catastrophes. I have never, not once, filed a report that required the phrase, "Subject dismantled the training weapon with her bare hands and then handed the pieces back with a smile." Until today. The veteran combined military has been training alongside human forces for 11 rotations now. I did 11 rotations of carefully worded collaboration agreements, 11 rotations of diplomatic patience and cultural sensitivity briefings, and the kind of interspecies optimism that looks very good on a funding proposal. And in 11 rotations, I had genuinely believed, I had been told, that the humans were the ones who needed instruction. Instructor Warden Palis said it himself the morning she arrived. "We will teach her the grip first. Humans always start with the grip." He said it the way he says everything, like a cliff explaining to water why falling is a choice. She listened. She nodded. She held the weapon exactly as he demonstrated. And then she showed him something that does not appear in any training manual I have ever read. What follows is my official observer's log of that session. I have added timestamps. I always add timestamps. It helps me feel like I understand what I'm watching. It did not help today. But the first thing I noted about the human was her boots. Not her posture. Not her rank insignia. Not the scar that ran from her left ear to the edge of her jaw, like someone had tried to write something on her face and given up halfway. Her boots. They were wrong. Not wrong in a dangerous way. Wrong in the way a door left slightly open is wrong. A small asymmetry that your eye keeps returning to, looking for the source of the imbalance. The left boot was laced standard, tight, even, practiced. The right boot was laced cross-pattern, re-knotted twice at the top, with what appeared to be a length of thin wire threaded through the last two eyelets where the lace had probably snapped. She'd fixed it with whatever she had. Sometime in the last 48 hours. She hadn't considered it worth mentioning. I noted it at 7:14, and then spent approximately 6 minutes annoyed at myself for noting it. Instructor Warden Palis arrived with the kind of punctuality that functions as a personality. He is tall, even for a veteran. The crest along his spine fully extended puts him at a full head above most of our officer class, and he carries it the way old mountains carry weather. Without acknowledgement, without apology. 22 years in the combined military. 17 as a certified weapons instructor. He has trained soldiers from 6 species. He does not raise his voice. He does not need to. The human was already on the floor, doing something with her wrists. Not stretching exactly, rotating. Grinding the joint in slow circles, then fast ones, then pausing to flex all 5 fingers in sequence like she was checking inventory. Palis watched her for a moment. She didn't notice or didn't care, which I had already begun to suspect were the same thing for her. "Specialist Reyes," he said. She looked up. "Why, that's me." "You are aware of the purpose of today's session. Integration assessment. Combat proficiency evaluation." She stood. She was not particularly tall. She was not particularly large. She had the kind of build that looks understated until you notice the neck. "You're here to see if I can handle veteran pattern arms. I'm here to pass." "You are here," Palis said, "to learn. Whether you pass is secondary." She looked at him for a moment. "Sure," she said. "In the veteran pattern sidearm, designation V7 press mark, standard issue across 3 combined fleets, is not a complicated weapon. It is not elegant either. It is built the way a fortification is built. Heavy, reliable, deliberately resistant to cleverness. The grip assembly requires a specific orientation of the 4-fingered veteran hand, with the thumb equivalent braced against a ridge that sits on human anatomy approximately nowhere useful. I have seen humans pick up veteran weapons before. They always make the same face. The face of someone who has just been handed a tool designed for a different species and been told it's intuitive. Specialist Reyes made a different face. She turned it over once, slow, checked the weight distribution, pressed her thumb against the ridge that wasn't designed for her, and held it there, feeling, what? Resistance? Geometry? I couldn't tell. Then she tried the grip Payless had demonstrated. It was wrong. Biomechanically, observably, technically wrong. Her hand structure meant the firing pressure would transfer at an angle. The recoil would roll rather than absorb. At distance, over a sustained engagement that adds up into something that misses. She dry-fired at once. Something shifted in her expression that I don't have good language for. Not frustration, more like she'd been given a puzzle with intentionally missing pieces and had just confirmed the pieces were actually missing. The grip compensates for our thumb ridge differential, Payless said. Your species lacks the... Yeah, I can feel that. She didn't say it rudely. She said it the way a mechanic confirms a diagnosis. What's the recoil pattern on live rounds? You will not reach live rounds today. Today, we establish... Is it documented somewhere? A pause. Small. Payless did not like the pace of this conversation. The specs are on record. So yes. Can I see them tonight? I wrote in my log, subject is task-focused, possibly impatient. I would later cross that out and write, subject is studying. The drill was straightforward. Stance, grip, aim, dry fire. Repeat until the motion was settled into muscle. Standard integration protocol. Payless ran every new species through it the same way. The same increments, the same corrections, the same patient authority. Reyes did not need to be told twice about stance. She adjusted before he finished the correction. Not performance. She was already processing half a beat ahead, taking his instruction and testing it against what her body was reporting back, running some constant internal calibration that I found difficult to look directly at. Payless noticed. He did not say anything, but he noticed. The grip, though. The grip remained wrong. Not because she wasn't trying. She was, visibly, but because her hand was not designed for this and no amount of training would redesign her hand. The ridge sat wrong. The angle sat wrong. The weapon kept wanting to rotate in her palm on the recoil simulation, and she kept catching it over and over, making the same tiny corrective grab every cycle like she was arguing with the weight of it. By the 40th repetition, Payless called a pause. You are compensating, he said. It was not criticism. It was diagnosis. I know. The compensation will degrade under stress, under live fire, under sustained engagement. I know that too. Then you understand that this grip is the correct grip. For your anatomy, for my anatomy, she said, this grip is never going to be correct. She held the weapon up, the grip wrong in her hand, but intentionally wrong now, held at the angle she'd been defaulting to. But this one might be learnable. Payless looked at the angle. I looked at the angle. It was, I will admit, not entirely illogical. That is not the prescribed technique, he said. What's the prescribed technique for a hand that doesn't match the hardware? Silence. Not the comfortable kind. He ran her through the standard course anyway. He is an instructor. The standard course is the standard course. She completed it. Every station. The recoil compensations, the target acquisition sequences, the malfunction drills. She moved through all of it with the focused, slightly bleak determination of someone doing a job they know is underselling them. Not resentment, just the particular efficiency of someone who has spent a long time performing tasks designed for someone slightly different from themselves. I watched her catch the weapon on every compensatory grab and I thought, she's been doing this her whole life. Not the weapon, something like it. The malfunction drill. Standard protocol. A simulated jam introduced mid-sequence. The correct response is a 3-stage clear, rack, check, reset, performed in the prescribed order at the prescribed pace. The jam hit. She racked it. The jam didn't clear. She checked, found the issue, a debris simulation in the ejection port, and then, instead of resetting to stage 1 per protocol, she did something that made Payless go very still. She inverted the weapon. It tapped the port twice against her own palm with the specific force of someone who has done exactly this before in a situation where 3-stage protocols were a luxury, cleared the obstruction manually with her thumb, and had it back in firing position in the time it would have taken her to complete stage 2 of the prescribed method. It worked. The simulation registered a successful clear. Palis stared at her. She looked at her thumb. There was a small red line across it from the ejection port edge. She wiped it on her thigh without looking at it. "That is not the approved clearing technique," Palis said. "No," she agreed. "It risks injury to the operator. Minor injury." She looked at her thumb again, briefly. "Cleared faster, though." I wrote in my log, "Subject demonstrates significant prior field experience with improvised solutions." Then I sat with that for a moment. Then I wrote, "Subject has cleared jams like this before, possibly many times. This is not improvisation. This is memory." Palis called the morning session to a close with the measured efficiency of a man who has a great deal more to say and has decided not to say any of it yet. He told her she had demonstrated foundational competency. He told her the afternoon session would address strength calibration requirements for veteran pattern combat scenarios, which have load-bearing benchmarks designed for species with our musculature. He said it carefully, not cruelly, but the implication was clear. There are things here that your body cannot do. She listened to all of it. "What time this afternoon?" she asked. "I'll be here." She picked up her kit. She was almost to the door when she paused. Not dramatically, just the way someone pauses when they've just remembered something small. "The grip you showed me," she said. "You've been teaching it for 22 years. How many species have you trained?" Palis considered whether to answer. 6. "Has any of them used it correctly? The prescribed form, exactly as designed?" A longer pause. "The veteran soldiers," he said finally. She nodded once, like that had confirmed something she hadn't been sure about. "See you at 1400, she said. She left. The door closed. I sat with my log open and did not write anything for a full 2 minutes. What I finally wrote, "She is not studying the weapon. She is studying him. And she is being very, very patient about it." She was already there when I arrived, not warming up, not reviewing anything, just sitting on the floor against the far wall with her right boot off, rethreading the wire through the last 2 eyelets, methodical and unhurried. A small task done right because it was there to be done. The kind of thing that only matters to the person who has to walk on it. As I sat down at my observer's station and opened my log and did not say anything, because I am an observer, and observers do not introduce themselves to subjects, and also because I was not entirely sure what I would say. She put her boot back on. I wrote, "Subject arrived early. Rebooted. Ready. Palis arrived." Of course. He had a data slate under one arm and the expression of a man who had spent the morning hours reviewing something that had adjusted his expectations without fully overturning them. I recognized the expression. I see it on officers after an intelligence briefing that doesn't change the mission, but does change the questions. "Specialist Reyes?" "Warden. This afternoon we addressed the strength calibration assessments." He set the slate down, pulled up the specs. "Veteran pattern combat operations require load-bearing capacities of..." "I read the specs last night," she said. He stopped. "You asked if they were documented. You said they were. I didn't give you access. The combined integration files are listed as shared documentation under the Joint Operations Accord. Section 12, Subclause 4. She said it without inflection, not triumphant, just accurate. I read the specs. I understand the benchmarks. I'd like to attempt them. Palis looked at her for a long moment. I am fairly certain this was not how he expected the afternoon to begin. Very well, he said. The load-bearing assessment is not, in its design, a test of cruelty. I want to be clear about that. It is calibrated for veteran physiology, dense, quad-jointed, built for the specific gravity and terrain of our homeworld. The benchmarks are what they are, because our operational equipment is what it is. The full combat loadout, armored vest, auxiliary power cell, emergency breach kit, secondary arms, runs to approximately 112 standard weight units. The minimum passing carry is sustained movement across 300 meters under that load. For veteran soldiers, this is challenging, possible with training, something most of them pass within the first 6 months of service. For a human of Reyes's size, the projection models put the probability of passing at somewhere below 30%. I had checked the models that morning. I had not enjoyed checking them. She looked at the loadout laid out on the floor. "Full kit?" she asked. "Full kit," Pelis confirmed. "You are not required to—" "I know I'm not required." She started putting it on. The vest alone was not designed for her torso geometry. The auxiliary power cell sat wrong at her hip, angled out where it was supposed to sit flush. The breech kit hung lower than it should. She adjusted everything twice, with the specific resigned precision of a person who has spent a long time adapting equipment designed for someone else's body. And when she was done, it was still wrong, but it was managed. The difference between ill-fitting and non-functional. Pelis watched her. He did not offer to help. I don't think she would have accepted it. "When you are ready," he said. She looked down the 300-meter track, and she rolled her neck once. Left, right. Then she walked. I am going to be exact about this because I feel the exactness matters. The first 100 meters, functional. Uncomfortable, visibly. The loadout pulled at angles it wasn't meant to pull, and I could see her making micro adjustments every 20 meters or so, redistributing where the weight sat on her frame. Not elegant, effective. The second 100 meters, she slowed. The power cell had shifted again, and there was a point around the 160-meter mark where I thought, genuinely thought, that she was going to stop. She stumbled. Not a fall. A catch. Her right leg took an extra half-second to follow the left, and she stuttered forward and my hand moved to my log to timestamp the abort. She didn't abort. She walked slower. Smaller steps. More deliberate. The way someone walks when they've decided that speed is not the variable they're solving for anymore. At the third 100 meters, I stopped predicting. She finished at 14:19, 4 minutes and 38 seconds. She stood at the end of the track, breathing, visibly, audibly breathing, the kind of breathing that has weight to it. And then she turned around and looked back at the 300 meters she'd just walked. She didn't look triumphant. She looked like she was calculating. "You passed the minimum threshold," Pelis said. He said it the way a doctor confirms a diagnosis that surprised them. "What's the time needed for the advanced tier?" A pause. "That assessment is not required for integration clearance." I didn't ask if it was required. He looked at her. She was still breathing hard. The loadout was still on. She hadn't put it down. 4 minutes, 15 seconds. He said. She looked at the track again. "Can I have water first?" She ran it the second time. I want to be precise about this too. She ran it. Not a jog. A controlled run. The loadout swinging wrong. The power cell banging her hip on every stride, the breech kit oscillating with a mechanical complaint that I could hear from the observer's station. A full run across 300 meters under 112 weight units of misaligned equipment. She crossed the mark at 14:42:01, 3 minutes, 42 seconds, 23 seconds inside the advanced tier threshold. She put her hands on her knees. Yeah, she stayed there for a while. Pelis stood very still. I wrote in my log, 14:42:09. Then I stopped writing because I didn't know what to write next. The rest of the afternoon was supposed to cover combat scenario simulations, standard integration protocol, controlled conditions, scripted variables. Pelis had the scenarios staged. I had the evaluation rubric open. What actually happened does not fit neatly into evaluation rubric categories. And the first scenario, a 2-on-1 engagement simulation, padded training weapons, Pelis operating one attacker proxy, while a training drone managed the second. designed to assess defensive technique, weapon retention, fallback protocols. Reyes had the V7 in hand. Wrong grip, as established. Managed angle, as established. The scenario initiated. The drone came in from the left. She read it early. Too early, I thought at the time. Before I understood what she was reading, and instead of retreating to the prescribed defensive position, she moved toward it, closing distance, inside the weapon's effective range before it had finished its first attack sequence. At close quarters, the drone's scripted variables stopped being useful. She took it out in 2 moves I could not fully timestamp because they happened overlapping, and then she pivoted. Without pause, without reset, without giving her attention time to split, and was already repositioned for Palis before the drone simulation finished registering its defeat. Palis stopped. He looked at her. She was breathing again. Everything banging wrong, hair escaping whatever she'd pinned it with. "That is not the prescribed defensive response," he said. "No," she agreed. "But it worked. It worked against a simulation with predictable parameters. In a live engagement, the predictable parameters are usually the ones that kill you." She said it without heat. Flat, the way facts are flat. You give me scripted variables, I'll solve the script. The script isn't the point. Palis was quiet. "What is the point?" he said. Not a question. Barely a sentence. "I don't know what I'm walking into," she said. "That's always the point." He ran her through 4 more scenarios. She solved all 4 in ways that were either technically correct, technically improvised, or technically something I don't have a category for. The evaluation rubric sat open on my station, and I filled in very little of it because the rubric was built around expected patterns and she kept producing unexpected ones that nevertheless worked. At one point, she used the misaligned power cell, the one that kept banging her hip, as a deliberate counterweight, leaning into the swing of it to change her center of gravity mid-motion during the 3rd scenario. I do not think she planned that. I think she noticed it mid-movement and decided to use it. That was what I couldn't figure out how to file. The final scenario. Palis designed it himself, right there, departing from the standard protocol. I saw him adjusting the parameters on his slate before he announced it, and I noted the adjustment at 153902, and I noted that he had raised the complexity tier from integration standard to advanced officer, which is not a thing that is done in a first assessment session ever for any species. I did not say anything. I am an observer. The scenario: confined corridor, 3 training drones, the V7 set to registered empty, no shots available, weapon as baton only, and a mock extraction objective at the far end. It was not a fair scenario. I think that was the point. She looked at the setup. She looked at the empty indicator on the weapon. She looked at Palis. "You want me to run it?" she said. "If you choose to." She looked at the corridor. "How many times do I get?" "Once," he said. She ran it. I'll be honest. I can't give you a clean play-by-play, because what she did in that corridor was not clean. It was not a technique. It was a sequence of corrections, each one feeding the next. She took a hit from the first drone, absorbed it badly, and used the direction of the impact to accelerate herself toward the second instead of falling back. At the second drone, she fouled with the power cell, jammed against the corridor wall by her moving body weight, and it registered a dysfunction while she was already at the third, which she dealt with using the empty weapon in a way that Palis had specifically not designed for. The corridor was narrow. That was the point of the corridor. It wasn't narrow enough. She came out the other end. She was bleeding from her left forearm, the elbow, where she'd caught the wall on the first impact, and the loadout was significantly more displaced than it had been, and the wrong-gripped V7 was still in her hand, and she turned around and looked back at the corridor. Then she looked at Palis. Neither of them said anything for a moment. "The grip is wrong," Palis said. "I know. You will need to develop a reliable compensatory form before live fire qualification. I know that too." He looked at her, a long look, and the kind that reviews something. I have trained soldiers from 6 species, he said, in 22 years. She waited. None of them, he said, have asked me for the specs before the first session. She looked at him. Did any of them pass advanced tier on day 1? A pause. No, he said. Then maybe, she said, the specs are part of it. I finished my log at 16:02. I sat with it for a while before I sent it. My job is to assess integration potential, to evaluate whether a combined operation attachment is viable, whether the human can function within our protocols, our equipment requirements, our operational standards. The rubric is built around a specific question. Can this soldier become one of us? I don't think that's the right question anymore. I'm not sure I can articulate the right question yet, but I know it's different. I know it has something to do with the wire in the bootlace. It's with the way she read the specs she wasn't given access to. With the power cell, she turned into a counterweight because it was already swinging wrong anyway. With the way she looked at the corridor, she wasn't supposed to survive and said once and then just went. I sent the log with the standard completion headers. In the assessment field, overall integration viability, the options are insufficient, developing, competent, advanced. I checked advanced. Then I added one line in the notes field, which is technically optional and which I have, in 944 reports, never used before. Recommend expansion of integration framework. Current benchmarks are measuring the wrong variables. I closed the file. I made terrible coffee. I drank it. Outside, somewhere down the corridor, I could hear her asking someone where she could find the advanced tier specs. She'd already passed them. She was already looking for the next thing. I don't know what to do with that exactly. I'm going to need a better rubric.